Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the streaming series that brings you the greatest current cult and classic films. I'm your host, Steve Rubin, and tonight we introduce you to Steve McQueen's first starring feature. How about that? In fact, he's introduced as Stephen McQueen. The film is The Blob. And before you start dismissing this as another exploitation film from the 1950s, let me set the record straight. This is a good movie, released in color by Paramount and registering a pretty big hit for the studio that year. Written by Theodore Simonson and Kate Phillips and directed by Irvin S. Yeaworth Jr., known later mostly for his religious films, The Blob takes place in a single night when small-town teenagers are either drag racing, smooching it up, or watching scary movies at the midnight spook show. In the midst of all these raging hormones, Steve Andrews, Steve McQueen, properly cast as a teenager at age 28, and his lady friend Jane, portrayed by Anita Corso, discover a frightened old man on the highway who has a rapidly growing gelatinous mass on his arm. This is The Blob, which was originally going to be called The Glob, but producer Jack H. Harris discovered that the title was already taken. This all sounds a bit far out, and it is, but Yeaworth gets some pretty believable performances from his cast. And Steve is just terrific in a role that apparently brought him to the attention of the producers of a new television series called Wanted, Dead or Alive. Stardom was on the horizon for this Missouri native. From 1958, featuring a title song written by Burt Bacharach and Mac David and sung by the Five Blobs, which turns out was only one blob recording himself 5 times, let's watch The Blob. Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the streaming series that brings you the greatest in current classic and cult films. I'm your host, Steve Rubin, and boy, tonight we've got a really cool double feature for you. A double feature which showcases the special effects magic of Ray Harryhausen. And if you've never heard of Ray Harryhausen, tonight is Harryhausen 101. First up is 1958's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, a wonderful fantasy that takes the fabled sailor, portrayed in cool heroic fashion by Kerwin Matthews, and his band to the mysterious island of Colossa, the land of the Cyclops, a land populated by the stop-motion genius of Harryhausen. Also starring Catherine Grant, Torrin Thatcher, and Richard Eyre as the genie, and featuring a marvelous score by Bernard Herrmann, here is The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Here's a question I've always wondered about. How do you define a film classic? Is it what the books and the historians and the critics tell you? Or is it a film that affects you personally, in an emotional way, perhaps like no other form of pop cultural entertainment? I believe you define classics by what you believe and what you feel. Your classic makes you happy or sad, excited or depressed, sometimes riveted and sometimes terrified. But there's no question that for you, a classic makes a connection.
Saturday night.